Hey, well, good day to you. This is Todd. I am a regular dude walking in the Word. Today we are starting the book of Second Thessalonians. We're going to look at Second Thessalonians here. It's only 3 chapters long, and the first chapter we're actually going to do in 3 episodes here. I won't go into the details of the Thessalonian people and stuff. You can go back and watch the introduction to First Thessalonians if you want that information. But this book was written a short time after First Thessalonians, okay? First Thessalonians was written, and Paul was answering questions and so forth. As a result of that, more questions were answered. And during that time period, there was actually another letter written, we believe, that was, you might say, forged. It said it was by Paul, but it was not by Paul, okay? And so the big question that people had here was that the tribulation was happening, and they were like, oh, this is the tribulation, and this is what they were believing. And Paul, had to write this letter to say, no, this is not the tribulation. And these are the reasons why it is not the tribulation. And when the tribulation happens, these things will happen. Okay? So this book is dealing with the end times. We're not going to talk a lot about it in the first chapter, but in the second and third chapter, we will talk about it. And so you have to understand the whole timeline of the end times in order to understand this book and for it to make sense. And so I'll have like a chart, and you'll see what that is here. But today I wanted to talk about that. Paul opens up this letter, and it's the first chapter is only 12 verses long. In verses 1 through 4, he has encouragement of praise for the Thessalonian people. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that today here. It's kind of this Paul starts out the letter and then starts off right with encouragement and praise. Okay? So let me read here. This is 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. It says this: Paul, Silas, and Timothy, to the church of the Thessalonians, in God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, grace and peace to you from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, this is kind of the same standard opening he has in many of his letters. Now, he also adds that Silas and Timothy are with him during this time too. Okay, so they're naturally in agreement with what he's writing here. Verse 3, we ought to always thank God for you, brothers and sisters, and rightly so, because your faith is growing more and more, and the love all of you have for one another is increasing. Therefore, among God's churches, we boast about your perseverance and faith in all the persecutions and trials you are enduring. Okay, so there's 4 things Paul is praising to the church, and I'm bringing these things out because other churches you should be praising your own church and the things they're doing, but you can also be praising other churches too. So if they're, following God and teaching the Bible like they should be, we should be encouraging those churches and praising those churches for what they're doing. Okay, so the first thing, and this is from verse 3, he talked about their faith was growing during this, and there was persecution happening here. But during this persecution, their faith was growing. So they were growing, and Paul was like, that's amazing. That's great that your faith is growing during this time. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing was that their love was abounding. All right. Normally, when we get into a persecution and things get tough, our love does not abound. Okay, we're fighting with each other and so forth. But in this case, their love was abounding. They were, clinging to each other and loving each other. Okay, so that was honorable, and Paul was pointing that out. The third thing was their perseverance, and that's from verse 4. The perseverance, they were sticking with it even when the times got tough. Okay, a good example of perseverance is a long race, whether it be running or a triathlon or whatever. It takes perseverance to finish that race, much less even win that race. But it's not just like, oh, I'm going to run a 100-yard dash and be done. No, I'm going to run 26 miles, and those 26 miles, it's going to get tough at the end. And so it takes perseverance to finish that race. And Paul is pointing that out here. He's like, I praise you because you guys have perseverance. these times are getting tough, and it looks like it's not ending in the near future. And he was praising their perseverance. Okay, and then the fourth thing was that they were thriving during persecutions. Okay, and you can see throughout history, when persecution happens, a lot of times the church thrives. Okay, I'll just use one example. In Cuba, when the church was persecuted and really, the government kind of closed and said, oh, no more churches, and they put all kinds of rules and regulations on the churches. Well, during that time period, the churches actually thrived. And then when studies were done later on the church in Cuba, it was like, well, this church did really well. Same thing in China and other places where there was severe persecution. The church actually thrived during that time. And so Paul is praising that. So those four things, Paul was encouraging, and he was encouraging and giving praise in those situations. So look for ways that you can be an encouragement to other churches that are around, to your own church, of course, too, when they're doing these things. But then also to other churches that are around, whether it be here locally or whether it be, overseas or in another state or whatever. Find ways that you could be an encouragement to those churches. All right. Hey, thanks for watching. I am a regular dude walking in the Word, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue talking about chapter 1 of 2 Thessalonians. Lord's blessing. I'll see you then.